heard anybody's first sermon, especially someone who thinks they're going to be a pastor someday, but they're generally pretty awful. They're just generally pretty awful. And I say that as someone whose first sermon was genuinely awful. It was awful. And I think it's because preachers, when they start preaching, are people who have sat in the pews and watched preachers and thought, well, I could do that, without knowing how it's done, right? Because people do that in almost all of our whatever job you have. Everybody thinks they can do it. And there are also people who have thought a lot about what they're going to say when they finally get in the pulpit. And so they've got all these clever lines and they're going to cram them into their first sermon. And that sermon is awful. 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 Mine were awful. Everyone else in my preaching class, their first sermons were awful. It was just a lot of painfully bad preaching. But there's a point at which everyone who's going to be a preacher shifts and they start really preaching, and you stop hearing whatever style it is they grew up listening to, and you start hearing their real preaching voice, their style, who they will be as a preacher. And those student sermons are some of the best sermons you've ever heard, because the future preacher is becoming a preacher, and they're finally humble, and they're finally feeling the weight of the word, and now they have the skill set to do and the passion for what, this is what I've always wanted to do. And that's when you get banger sermons. So I remember the first banger sermon I ever heard. It was not me, because it took longer for me to preach an okay sermon than this guy. This young, aspiring preacher stood up. We'd all heard him bomb before, so we had pretty low expectations of what was going to come out of his mouth. But this time, he captivated us. He started telling a story about his involvement in a presidential campaign. And my first thought was, I can't believe he's going to tell a political story in a United Methodist seminary. And my second thought was, that's the politician whose national campaign he worked on? And it doesn't matter who it was, because it took me 10 minutes of hard thinking this week to remember who the presidential candidate was that he worked for. It's not a household name anymore. Who it was isn't the point and isn't important. What was important was how much he loved working on this campaign. He felt drawn to supporting this politician, and he got increasingly involved in campaign work. He had never been with a group of people that he felt such an easy camaraderie with before. He got along with all the other campaign workers. Everyone that worked together agreed on what was important. The politician was uniquely good at pulling people in to what the young pastor called under the umbrella. They felt safe together. They felt like good times were going to come with this politician holding the umbrella over them. And all they had to do was spread the word and get other people to come in under the umbrella. And everyone who did, everyone who showed up, they got along and they agreed and they felt safe from everything outside the umbrella, which included the election, which they lost spectacularly, because nobody voted in the primaries for that politician except the people under the umbrella. They were having such a great time being together and being understood and safe that they forgot about everything and everyone outside in the rain. They forgot to go anywhere. They just loved being in a safe huddle together. And you don't have to think too hard before you can see this as an analogy for churches. Right? So we were all listening to him, and we were sagely shaking our heads in that way new preachers do. Oh, yes, I know where you're going. And then he turned it on us, and he preached a whole word about living water and how it is going to fall whether you have an umbrella or not. But if you have an umbrella, it's not going to hit you. He asked why, he pointed out how you can't go anywhere quickly under an umbrella. You really don't go anywhere at all. And he pointed out how life happens outside the umbrellas we choose to get under, and that living water is going to flow over it and around it and off of it and on it, but not below it. And that we as Christian servant leaders probably needed to go stand in the rain. We probably needed to go stand in the rain. Oof. Ugh. Ugh. It wasn't what we expected from him. And I know this isn't what he meant to happen, but that's the day I gave up owning an umbrella. That's not what he meant, but that's my conclusion. I don't know if you've ever seen me walking in the rain like a fool, but it's not because I'm a fool. It's because over 20 years ago, I made a decision that I was going to let God's living water fall on me. And I took it on like a hair shirt, if you've ever heard of those, like a form of penance. It's a lifelong Lenten discipline. I'll occasionally stand under someone else's umbrella, like if I'm doing a burial, but I don't own an umbrella, I don't borrow an umbrella, I don't carry an umbrella. For more than 20 years, I have thought about that lesson every time I even suspect I'm gonna have to walk in the rain. And I think about that sermon, and I think about that young preacher who is still preaching in Illinois, and he does carry an umbrella because he's kind of precious about his hair. But mostly, I remember that I am not called to live my life carrying or hiding under an umbrella. That's not my call. In Ezekiel, God's giving out a whole wound up word on shepherds. And by shepherd, God doesn't mean the people who keep sheep, but the people who keep people, the leaders. He accuses them of growing comfortable off the sheep, but not taking care of the sheep. He accuses them of not taking care of the weakest of the flock, or of going after those that have gotten lost. And he accuses the shepherds of being harsh and brutal with the sheep. And now their flock, God's flock, is scattered to the winds and under attack by wild animals. And the shepherds, the leaders, are about to be held accountable. Accountable is a big word. It is one of my favorite words. It is an extremely Methodist word. It means being held responsible for your responsibilities. Being held responsible for completing your responsibilities. God is suggesting leaders need to be held accountable when the sheep under their care are not doing well. If the sheep are in bad shape, where's the leader? What's the leader doing? What are the leaders doing? When the people in their care are worse off than they were before, what are the shepherds doing? Are they taking care of the sheep? Or are they really good at taking care of themselves? Are they addressing the problems of the sheep? Or are they really good at bringing some people under the umbrella where everyone feels like it's safe because it's an echo chamber? Then Jesus comes along, in John 10, and he picks up the idea of people as sheep and shepherds as leaders, but he calls the other leaders hired hands. There are people who approach responsibility like that guy at Best Buy with an, well, I'll do it because I get paid for it mentality, right? Or this is my paycheck, and this is what I have to do. We talked about that last week. Some jobs are just jobs, and people need a job, and that's the job they got, so that's their job, and they don't want any more. It's a hired hand mentality. It's about getting what I have to get done and then getting what I need for doing the job I did. Some people don't necessarily take the responsibility they're given and run with it like it's their life's work. They get what they get and they don't throw a fit, maybe. Jesus is saying that a lot of leaders are hired hands. They do what they do to get what they want to get. Leading the people is their means to an end, but it's not what they live to do. It's not even about the people they're leading at all. And Jesus is different. Jesus is the good shepherd, he says. Jesus is the one who was born for leading people and does it with zeal and accountability. He will account for the shape of his flock. Like an employee who is born to do their job. I'm going to lean into this all the way. Let's go. And yes, in this passage, he foretells his death when he talks about laying down his life for his sheep. And he also foretells his resurrection by saying he'll take it back up again. But he's really focusing here on the way he wants his people led. And how different it is when people are under the care of a good shepherd. And where is the good shepherd? Among the sheep. The sheep know the shepherd's voice because they hear it regularly. The good shepherd is the gate, the way out to a bigger, fuller, more abundant life, out in the rain of living water. A good shepherd is not the illusion of safety like a hired hand that will make you feel like someone's watching, but they'll run away when trouble comes because they're really there for themselves. The good shepherd is not the one holding this umbrella in a storm for only their followers. It's the one standing with you in the storm and showing everyone the way to safety. The one carrying those who are too weak to make it on their own. The one who goes and looks for the ones who got lost. The one who truly cares for the sheep. That's the good shepherd. That's our good shepherd. And that image runs all through Scripture. We hear it in the prophets in Ezekiel. We hear it in John. We hear it in the Psalms. What's the psalm we say the most? The 23rd. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. I memorized that when I was Southern Baptist, so it's like partially King James Version, but you know what it means. We get it in the Psalms. We get it in the prophets. We get this image in John because this would have made sense to the people of the day. Sheep and shepherds would have made sense. Shepherds were all around. Hired hands were all around because shepherds can't shepherd 24 hours a day. This would have made perfect sense to the people of Israel and Judah because they had sheep, not horses. And they had sheep, not llamas, because they were all in South America. They had sheep, but not livestock guardian dogs because Israelites and Judeans didn't keep dogs. The more you know. Right? Sheep and shepherds is what they knew. And so that's a great analogy for people and leaders. God was their leader, God said. God is their shepherd. Jesus was the shepherd among the people, showing them what true leadership looked like, what accountable leadership looks like. Shepherds who answer for and stand for the health of their flock while the storms of life raged. Not shepherds who had loyal people gathered under the umbrella feeling good about being together and not going anywhere good. because politicians and umbrellas are a 21st century analogy that makes sense to us, just like sheep and shepherds did to first century Judeans. So I was talking to a friend the other day on the phone, and her kid was about to leave the house, and it was pouring where she lived. And her kid couldn't find an umbrella. And so I heard my friend say to her kid, I don't know why you're asking me. I don't own an umbrella. I don't use them. You know that. And I said, wait a minute, you don't use umbrellas? That's bizarre. How do we have that in common? And she said, I heard this sermon once, a long time ago, about umbrellas. I think it was in seminary, and I walked out of there. It wasn't his point, but I walked out of there with the decision that I would never use an umbrella again. And I said, girl, I was in that class with you. What kind of neurodivergence do we share that we both walked out and said, no more umbrellas for me, when that was not his point? You know that man uses umbrellas. And we laughed, because that's very us, to live our lives wrong because we want to be reminded to do our service lives right. And I have to tell you, it was so nice for a moment to be under the proverbial umbrella with her, together with our shared history and odd conclusions that we go to feel so understood. But then we stepped out from under it, and we went back to our respective worlds in which the rain falls and we are often misunderstood, because although it was very comfortable under that umbrella together, it's not where God calls either of us to stay. Let me be perfectly clear. I am not asking you to give up umbrellas. But I am asking you to pay attention with me to the umbrellas under which we stand. To ask ourselves if we're going anywhere under them. If we're called to stay there, huddled together, or if we're just comfortable, called or comfortable. And to ask ourselves whether we might consider going through the gate instead, after the Good Shepherd, to a more abundant life out in the rain. Amen.
Give me